One Great Earth. My name is Dan. Thank you for joining me. We got a little bit to get into today. Emissions hit record highs, climate change helping H5N1 evolve, and lastly, what if there just is no solution to climate change? Now, I tend to be too much on the reality of the situation, and I don't involve enough positive stories in my time here, which I understand completely, but it is difficult to find positive news regarding climate change, especially right now, especially these days, is that it's hotter than ever, and more of the country is under heat waves than it has ever been. People are arguing against it. People are arguing against there has been days where heat waves. We're not talking about cities. We're not talking about regions. We're talking about a third of the country is under a heat wave that is dangerous and deadly. These are all related. This is why I do this. Every story I pick, every story I've read, it's all related. It's all relative to each other. It's pretty spectacular. It feels tropical today. It feels very moist and hot in the air. Over 90 degrees, thunderstorming, raining. It's a myriad fluctuations. But it's when the fluctuations are made more extreme due to climate change. Because this storm that hit today is going to hit today, regardless. But it's with climate change that it becomes that much more worse. It is a fundamental cornerstone of climate change that it enhances the weather, it enhances our climate in ways that we can only speculate. At least not until last year. Over the last year, we've seen the hottest year on record. We have seen the most polar ice caps melt. We've seen the least amount of fast ice. And we've seen massive losses of marine and animal life. Over 90% of emperor penguins, their chicks are thought to have perished over the last year due to the lack of fast ice. Polar bears as well rely on fast ice. There is so much that goes along with the ability for water to freeze and have ice cover marine life underneath the water. Instead, it becomes unbearably hot, and that's when we have billions of Alaskan snow crabs missing. They didn't migrate. They've always been there. Now it's the second year in a row and crab season's called off. Where does it end, and what does it take to put a stop to what's causing us the greatest harm? And that is the burning of fossil fuels, causing massive climate fluctuations. So a storm that hits Florida, that's 91L. It's not even a named storm, and it brings along like a category 1 or 2 level amount of rain in just one storm. We're losing this battle by doing nothing by apathy, we are losing this battle. For everything that I talk about, everything that I bring up, every article I list, every article I read, is just another step closer to understanding climate change. It is a very complex and complicated topic because it doesn't just stop at borders. It doesn't just stop at the city line. It is far more all-encompassing than people would like to understand or believe. But that's whenever it becomes climate denialism. It's not just one set of people that are denying that the climate is, or climate change is happening at a global scale. It's not that it's that climate change is real regardless if we want to believe it or not, either if we are in the camp that believes that it's a hoax, or it's in the camp that believes that it's not happening as fast or quickly as talked about, as predicted. Talking about 20 goals, in 2030, but that might be too late. The world can't afford another summer of 120-degree plus days in some countries. We have over 1,000 people in the Hajj in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, that have died due to heat exhaustion, and a huge portion of them being Egyptian. It just goes to show you just how quickly intense heat can become a killer, a widespread killer. With the wet bulb temperature in play, you have to be careful, because there can be a point where the weather is going to be detrimental to any kind of activity whatsoever, because sweating is no longer going to give us the cooling that our bodies so desperately need. Please take care in this heat, because I know it's not just our backyard. It's all over the place. Saudi Arabia putting numbers over 125.9 degrees Fahrenheit. This is while people are performing a ritual known as the Hajj, where they walk around giant cube 7 times. It is the videos that I've seen, I can't show on here because it's too graphic. But people are dying in the streets in great numbers. I don't want to use the word great there, but that's the word that came out. These numbers that are coming out are just only going to get worse as more people fall prey to heat. It is becoming the #1 killer, environmental factor, as workers' rights get thrown out the window in some states. Some countries won't allow you water breaks. You're working in hellish conditions with just your shirt and shoes. No additional equipment or cooling or help. People that are working in huge factories and shops are suffering right now. It isn't just the people that are at home without air conditioning. It's the people that are at work that have no choice but to continue their day into what could be heat exhaustion or worse. The world is getting hotter, and as water heats up, as the oceans heat up, water expands, causing sea level rise. There doesn't need to be Antarctica-sized ice that melt into the sea to cause sea level rise that will be detrimental to all human life on coasts, cities. But the amount of precipitation in the atmosphere that it retains and transfers with the rain cycle can only get worse when you exacerbate that cycle, whenever you shock it. Now, this first article is from CNN. Fossil fuel use and emissions hit record highs as world struggles with deadly heat, storms, and fires. A coal picker carries coal from near an open cast mining site on the outskirts of Dhanbad, India. Image from last year. The world consumed record amounts of oil, coal, and gas last year, pushing planet heat carbon pollution to a new high, according to a report published Thursday, shattering climate scientists' hopes that global energy emissions may have peaked. The growth in fossil fuels drove a 2.1% increase in energy-related emissions last year, pushing them above 40 billion metric tons for the first time, according to a report published Thursday by the Energy Institute. The report paints a bleak picture of a world struggling to wean itself off planet-warming fossil fuels, even as the impacts of the climate crisis become more intense and more deadly. Brutal extreme heat is currently scorching swaths of the planet. A heat wave unlike any seen in decades is sweeping large parts of the United States, which is also grappling with deadly wildfires, storms, and severe flooding. Hundreds of people has died as temperatures rose to 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the annual Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca in Saudi Arabia. And India is currently grappling with a deadly summer heat wave which has killed dozens of people. Northern India as well is grappling with temperatures well above 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The report also shows that even though the world is adding clean renewables at record levels, global energy demand is growing so fast that fossil fuels are filling the gaps. Last year was another year of highs in our energy-hungry world, said Juliet Davenport, president of the Energy Institute. Energy is central to human progress, she added. It is also now central to our very survival. Global consumption of oil, coal, and gas rose by 1.5% in 2023, driven in particular by a strong growth in oil. Last year, the world consumed more than 100 million barrels a day for the first time, the report found. The U.S. remained the largest oil producer, growing its output by 8% last year. Overall, the proportion of fossil fuels in the 2023 global energy mix remained largely the same, at 81.5%, down from just 0.5% from the previous year. Fossil fuel growth was particularly strong in developing economies, the report found. India's fossil fuel consumption was up 8% last year, and for the first time ever, the country used more coal than Europe and North America combined. Image is a coal-fired thermal power plant in India. In China, fossil fuel use soared to new record high in 2023, up by 6%, as the end of its extended COVID lockdowns led to a rebound in fossil fuels. However, the share of fossil fuels in the country's overall energy mix is declining as China continues to add huge amounts of renewables. The report does point to some positive developments. Fossil fuel use in major advanced economies is likely to have peaked and is beginning to fall, it found. In the US, fossil fuels fell to 80% of total energy consumed. In Europe, fossil fuels made up less than 70% of the energy mix for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, driven by reduced demand and renewable energy growth. Energy generation from renewables, including hydropower, was up 13% almost entirely due to a boom in wind and solar, according to a report, although the rise in renewables was not enough to match increased global demand for energy, which rose 2% in 2023. In a year where we have seen the contribution of renewables reaching a new record high, ever-increasing global energy demand means the share coming from fossil fuels has remained virtually unchanged, said Simon Varley, Vice Chair and Head of Energy and Natural Resources I return. I apologize. My cat, I looked over while he was sleeping. I was like, gonna see all this nice little cute cat sleeping, you know? And I see him holding my cup with his paw. And then he just does this. It goes flying off the counters. And just went everywhere. This is a cat. This one. This one makes all the trouble. Go play. Oh my god, so much. That was so much. That's so much liquid. I barely had any other drink. Forgot where I was. It was a coffee. Spilled my coffee. It was a full cup. Now he's going crazy trying to find out where the source of this scent is coming from that he just created. Just grabbed it and just pulled it over and just watched me. Watched me react. He sent that thing flying too. I can't even believe it. There's no liquid anywhere until where it landed. Okay. Where was I? The report does point to some positive developments. Fossil fuel use in major advanced economies is likely to have peaked and is beginning to fall, it found. In the US, fossil fuels fell to 80% of total energy consumed. In Europe, fossil fuels made up less than 70% of the energy mix for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, driven by reduced demand and renewable energy growth. Energy generation from renewables, including hydropower, was up 13%, almost entirely due to a boom in wind and solar, according to the report. Although the rise in renewables was not enough to match increased global demand, which rose 2% in 2023. I think I was there before. I read that. In a year where we have seen the contribution of renewables reaching a new record high, ever-increasing global energy demand means the sharing coming from fossil fuels has remained virtually unchanged. Dave Jones, Global Insight Director at climate think tank Ember, who was not involved in the report, said it should be a wake-up call for governments to act. The world is still as hungry as ever for energy. To turn the tide on fossil fuel use, renewables needs to rise as much faster, whilst keep an eye on energy less wastefully. To limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, a target countries agreed to in the Paris Agreement in 2015, the world needs to roughly halve emissions by the end of the decade. We're already too late. The world is getting hotter, and it might be too late. After all the people screaming and being angry and hateful because what they deem as a hoax or fake is killing us. There's no amount of denial that can fix that can make things okay. We're dealing with factors that are far beyond expectation. As the world becomes hotter and hotter, it becomes that much more difficult for human beings to survive. It might be too late, and we're just a very massive heat wave away from, and I mean a heat wave, I'm talking like the Midwest and Northeast, I'm talking about it getting to 110 degrees. Talking about Nevada, Arizona reaching 115 degrees. It's unbearable. I think people living with nothing and living outside, how are they surviving or coping? How? Cooling centers are open in some areas, but again, this is difficult to survive if you don't have decent air conditioning, which can be expensive. And then you have the air conditioner units that just stick outside the window. After a certain amount of heat, I mean, you're not getting any kind of cooling. Climate change is helping the H5N1 bird flu virus spread and evolve. This from the conversation. The spread of the highly pathogenic avian influenza virus H5N1 among animals is unprecedented, having been found on all continents except Oceania, with the United Nations calling it a global zoonotic animal pandemic. H5N1 is known to be able to infect over 350 species of birds and close to 60 species of mammals with migratory waterfowl, including ducks, swans, geese, and gulls, being especially susceptible to various avian-borne influenza viruses. H5N1 infected waterfowl are normally asymptomatic carriers. However, these birds can infect other species, including mammals, along their migratory routes. This global transference allows disease to spread and for virus genetics and virulence to continually adapt. Alarmingly, evidence indicates that climate change seems to be impacting the emergence of zoonotic viruses like H5N1. As global climate conditions change, avian migratory patterns and routes are also changing. Higher temperatures and extreme weather has resulted in large-scale population shifts in a range of temperature species. These changes have led to diseases emergence in areas and in genetic configurations entirely unique and unprecedented. H5N1 is a clear indication that disease monitoring and response efforts are an essential part of any climate change adaptation and migration strategy. Temperature. H5N1. The ecology and genetics of H5N1 viruses have evolved significantly since first being detected in China in 1997. The H5N1 virus has been detected in the polar regions, and the first confirmed case of a polar bear dying from H5N1 was recorded in Alaska in 2022. Antarctica has seen significant rates of mortality in its native elephant and fur seal populations as a result of viral exposure. Non-migratory wild birds are highly susceptible to H5N1 infections brought on the wings of their more transitory cousins. There have been approximately 75,000 bird casualties globally as per the World Animal Health Information System. However, efforts to accurately estimate the total number of wild birds which have died as a result of H5N1 are hampered by issues in data quality and availability. Meanwhile, a 2022 report on the state of wild birds in the United States estimated that over 3 billion birds have been lost in part due to climate-related factors. On land, the H5N1 virus has been detected in dairy cattle, and in 2024, a Texas agricultural worker was infected with H5N1. These cases just suggest that H5N1 is adapting to infect mammalian hosts. In March this year, reports began to emerge of unusual deaths in young goats on a farm in Minnesota. That same farm had individuals in its poultry flock test positive for H5N1, and the goats and poultry shared similar spaces and water sources. It was later determined that the H5N1 strains in both the poultry and goats were highly related. In May of 2024, the U.S. Department of Agriculture confirmed the detection of H5N1 in alpacas on a farm in Idaho. Similar to previous cases, this farm also had a backyard poultry population test positive for H5N1 with unusually high amounts of the virus detected across the farm. To date, 12 states in the U.S. have reported outbreaks of H5N1 with 101 dairy herds affected. The discoveries of H5N1 on farms, alongside recent analyses of viral dispersal patterns, reiterate the importance of climate change shifting the migratory patterns of birds and the spread of viruses around the globe. Climate change and H5N1. There is increasing evidence that climate change is accelerating the global spread and emergence of new H5N1 variants, with evidence that wider seasonal variation is enabling the emergence of novel H5N1 variants. In North America, the warmer winters and earlier onset of spring, which global warming is causing, could allow moisture-reliant pathogens to survive and spread more easily. Meanwhile, cooler and wetter conditions can enhance the survival of influenza viruses and bird droppings in contaminated water. In the image here, a California condor named Hope is seen at the condor habitat at the Los Angeles Zoo in May 2023. California condors will receive a vaccine for a deadly strain of avian influenza that threatens to wipe out the already threatened vulture species. Simply put, the spread of influenza viruses around the globe is dictated by their ability to survive long enough in a place to be able to transmit elsewhere, and climate change is, in some cases, making this survival more likely. The recent cases of poultry to human and cattle to human transmission underscore the threats posed by these viruses and the importance of understanding how climate change is affecting their spread. The implications and mitigation. The H5N1 virus poses a significant threat to public health, and the recent cases in the U.S., coupled with H5N1's high mortality rates in humans, underscores the need for vigilant monitoring. Dealing with viruses is always a challenge, however. Climate change is upending many conventional understandings as shifting waterfowl migration patterns and environmental conditions force us to change strategies. Strengthening healthcare infrastructure and educating communities about H5N1 risk are essential components of a comprehensive response strategy. Promoting sustainable agricultural practices such as improving biosecurity in poultry and cattle farms, reducing livestock population density, and enhancing barn ventilation systems is crucial. Innovative smart farming technology could also help track viral infections in poultry barns. Conservation efforts are essential to maintain healthy ecosystems and minimize viral spread. Restoring natural habitats can mitigate the effects of climate change on wild bird populations, thereby reducing the risk of H5N1 spillover. In the future, global leaders will need to be vigilant with respect to the trajectory of H5N1. International collaboration on disease management will be crucial for implementing climate adaptation strategies to safeguard the health of both our planet and its inhabitants against viruses like H5N1. More in line what we're talking about is this virus able to survive in more places? I have to let the cat out. The cat is let out. H5N1, climate change is helping to spread it. Bird migratory patterns are changing, and droppings are causing infections. There's also cattle. It's a massive amount of animals that are testing positive for H5N1 over the last 2 years. Make sure that was dry. So the cat literally just knocked over my cup. The Guardian. What if there just is no solution? How we are all in denial about the climate crisis. Maya Goodfellow, this is from The Guardian. In his new book, Tad DeLay suggests there is no rosy roadmap to go forward, but there are things we can do. You are in denial about the climate crisis. We all are, argues the American scholar Tad DeLay. Right-wing climate deniers are not the only ones with a problem, he says. When we speak in early June, after the release of his book, Future of Denial, for denial doesn't only amount to rejecting the evidence, he argues, it also consists of denying our role in the climate crisis, absolving ourselves through carbon offsets, hybrid cars, local purchases, and recycling. And in this, far more of us are implicated. In some ways, this argument might not seem all that new. Multiple authors have pointed out that green capitalism, not right-wing deniers of the crisis, is our greatest obstacle to properly confronting the problem. DeLay agrees. The difference is the lens he brings to it, using psychoanalysis to explain the mechanisms behind denial. In doing so, he refuses the neatness of a definitive or concretely optimistic path forward. Elaborate yet accessible, one chapter tells the history of Earth through the rising and falling carbon dioxide. Future of Denial is an eloquent, forthright text about the realities of the crisis and where it is heading. Similarly, when we speak, he is friendly, open, and does not seem to wallow in despondency. But his research has led him to informed conclusions that recognize the uncertainty and difficulty of where we are. He forgoes how to solve the crisis, answers. To offer up such promises would, I imagine, itself be a form of denial. DeLay looks to Freud for a framework to understand denial. Individuals negate distressing ideas, and when the repressed thoughts begins to surface, people either deny reality or accept it, but deny their moral culpability. This is how people respond to climate crisis, rejecting the science or committing to pseudo-solutions, gimmicks, and false promises to get themselves off the moral hook. I like to joke that America and many Western countries conveniently have a political party for whichever form of denial you would like to have regard to the climate. Raised as part of a very Baptist evangelical fundamentalist megachurch in Little Rock, Arkansas, he thought he would be a minister, but when he started reading theology and philosophy, everything began to fall apart. As a first-generation college student, the literature plus psychoanalysis gave him a language to think through and out of the very religious, conceptual, and cultural baggage with which he grew up. DeLay brings all of his interests, psychoanalysis, philosophy, and religion, to bear on the climate crisis. One impetus for writing Future of Denial, he says, was watching the UK Labour Party's 2019 manifesto and US Democrat Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign proposals get rejected largely by people who probably thought of themselves as science believers, even though both of them were proposing the most ambitious climate plans these countries had ever seen. This frustration shapes the book, which includes a chapter called What Does the Liberal Want? That is sharply critical of liberalism and ends with the damning line, they have no plan, nothing is fine. This denial is seductive to us all, and in many ways, it is in fact essential to function in the world. You can't admit as a capitalist subject that there is little you as an individual can do, DeLay writes, and neither can you imagine the end of capitalism. Your options then are intensely boring, attending meetings to advocate for a ban on new gas hookups or terrific eco-terrorism, and denial is going to come out in surprising other ways. DeLay himself is not immune. My second child was born while this book was being written, he says. Sometimes people will ask me, is this a type of denial? Perhaps. Is writing this book, me trying to be able to at least in part show them that I did what I could? Perhaps. Though an enthusiastic supporter of the youth climate movement, he has little time for clutching at the promise of young people saving us. I am all too familiar with this impulse. When I'm especially despondent about the state of the world, I look to them. They are the hope, they know what's what. But it's a comforting fantasy, he writes, which rests on believing that education and passion will get the job done without mucking up free markets with regulation or central planning. It also provides an easy out. If generational politics works, then we need to concern ourselves with class politics. There is the denial again, and one I haven't really recognized in myself. Denial is, of course, part of our everyday behavior, and delay has many examples. Teenagers act recklessly because they deny their own morality. Someone who will not go to the doctor when they know they should is in denial, and so too are people who have affairs and buy expensive cars because they cannot face up to how unsatisfying their life is. But when it comes to climate, there is too much to focus on denial as conscious belief, Delay thinks. We talk as if we are Protestants who think you get saved by having the correct thoughts about the big important question. If it is possible at all, then, forcing action on the climate crisis will not be achieved by making people believe it is real and dangerous. Most people don't really care that much about their beliefs, he says. Evangelicals who believe the end of the world is coming still invest in retirement funds, right? They still have children. They still do all these things to materially express belief in some sort of future. The higher up the chain you go, the less individual neuroses are the problem. Even if everyone is involved in fossil fuel extraction decided to stop, he argues, new companies would form overnight and file for leases with governments. The drive to consolidate profits and private property is unrelenting. Delay points to the tight correlation between GDP and emissions, and particularly GDP per capita. The more money you have, the richer you are, and the richer you are, the more likely you are to emit according to a high emissions lifestyle. He asks us all to reflect on the fact that whenever we hear the economy is doing well, that means fossil fuels are doing great. Where to go from here? Delay does not seem to have too much for self-indulgent doom. He says some people seem to almost enjoy the anxiety and impotence, nor for simplistic, rosy roadmaps for a way forward. He says there are some mitigation activities we should focus on. Though he's no fan of reformism, without the Labour Party in the UK or the Democrats in the US taking power, there is no chance of climate action, he says. Although what they offer is not very much at all, you can get some concessions from what he calls capitalist climate governance, the Paris Accord, COP, and limited funding. Delay also does not advocate for living as hedonistically as you want, suggesting there is use in reducing your own emissions, even if there is this patently not going to even touch the sides of the crisis. We cannot stop the progress of the storm, he tells me. This is too big. There is not a person on earth who has the agency to stop this individually. It's not even clear to me that anybody has much agency to stop this collectively. We might just be at the mercy of market logics, where falling renewable prices eventually convert us over. At least that's the hope, right? Evidence is still kind of wanting. Adaptation has more of a chance, he thinks. Some of the things that are being proposed now are grifts, such as carbon offsets, but may save us later, such as carbon capture. More immediately, he says, we could all use any expertise we have to support local activist groups and encourage young people to devote their life to the cause. As the effects of the crisis worsen, Delay argues inequality will rise, food prices will increase, and police and border budgets will balloon. It will probably be people of color, migrants, homeless people who will suffer the most, especially because when people see the hurricanes and the fires, they may believe in the climate crisis less, not more. Politicians will turn up the barbarism, and there will be something or someone else to blame. In this context, adaptation is also about unionizing in your workplace and engaging with reactionaries while you do it, discouraging police work, and doing things that are legal to help house migrants. There is no personal salvation, though. Just by driving to get groceries, you emit carbon dioxide, a fifth of which will still be in the air in 500,000 years, killing species that haven't yet evolved. We need to ask ourselves, what if there just is no solution to that at any sort of meaningful scale, and act accordingly? One more time, we need to ask ourselves, what if there just is no solution to that on any sort of meaningful scale regarding what we are capable of doing in climate change? Are we waiting for the first country to completely die? Are we waiting for the first country to see how they fare against climate change and looking into our own future? Are we looking at Saudi Arabia, Mecca at 125.9 degrees Fahrenheit and going, we're going to be there next? It's not that we must be there, we have to be there, we're going to be there. It is not without solution, but it's the rapid rate that we burn fossil fuels that's causing all of the chaos, everything that we know that's causing the chaos. If you haven't already, please like the stream, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out immensely and keeps me motivated in putting out climate-related videos like this. But people that won't accept that there is climate change, that climate catastrophes are happening at a more regular basis, that we're seeing areas that didn't have, 3 months of rain that fall in 3 hours. We're losing ground. Because the worse it gets, the more control smaller organizations will have. Because there's that much less to govern. Because if the environment's completely wrecked and destroyed, what do you care? What about the young people and their anxiety of the climate change that is constantly happening? That they can see there's no road, there's no one road. Because we're talking about an entire species, talking about human beings, and talking about, just like with COVID, getting a message clear and across all the channels need be to make changes that will be beneficial to the planet, to our generations coming up, our unborn children that are going to be breathing this in. We can't allow it to happen. But with so many people and such apathy on both sides and all sides, it's problematic. How do you solve a problem that nobody can agree on is a problem or even exists? I see a lot of people, they think it's funny to say that climate change is a hoax and they think they're trolling. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about irrefutable facts. Talking about supporting evidence that goes beyond just 1 or 2 streams, that it takes 7 or 8 streams to be able to get across with a lot of supporting evidence. It is harder to accept it, and it's harder and harder for me to continue this journey, because I don't want to say it's a lot of negative news, but yes, it is a lot of negative news, because that is the world that we're finding ourselves in right now. It's changing. We are seeing everything change right in front of us, and yet some people will deny that it's happening, even if it's literally in their own backyard. It is alarming that so many people that I've known that I wouldn't think would be so anti-climate change, that it's real reality. But that's where we're finding ourselves. We're finding ourselves at peak emission levels, hottest the year's ever been, the lowest sea ice. Even the Great Lakes didn't have any sea ice over the last winter. Now we're seeing that mild winter turn into a strong summer. There shouldn't be so many obstacles in people understanding the fundamentals behind climate change and why it's so important that everybody understand these building blocks, that climate change happens all the time now. All these storms that we see, that storm is still going to be there if climate change didn't exist, but climate change is making that storm 10 times stronger. You understand? This is not anything new. But what is new is the supporting evidence on the contrary that not only is climate change happening, it's happening rapidly at a pace that is outpacing our own speculations. We are running out of time. Now, you probably want to ask me for how many years left do I think we have? That can't be answered. But if I were to harbor a guess based on the amount of available carbon budget we have in the atmosphere and watching current conflicts, wars, picking up all kinds of horrible stuff into the atmosphere, as well as ocean trawling, when you pull that giant net across the bottom of the ocean floor, that kicks up a lot of carbon dioxide and other particulates into the atmosphere. It might take a few years, but it happens. So there is nothing that we're doing on a large scale that we're stopping. We need to stop ocean trawling. We need to stop netting these things because we need to inhibit the flow of currents, ocean currents, and not stop them. These are, see what I mean by these are big things. Nothing is simple, and there is time after time where I'm looking at something becoming exhausting because it just seems like nothing changes and everything's just getting worse. I'm sorry if you feel that way. I really am. I'm trying to find the most applicable I can't say it right now. I really do want to find more positive stories and outlook on climate. But as of right now, it is incredibly difficult to find some good news. The whole world is heating up to very dangerous levels. And it's places like Arizona that's over 100 degrees. And you have places like Michigan and Ohio that are over 90 degrees that have all the humidity. When are we going to pump the brakes, or at least take this seriously? How many mass casualty events will there be around the planet before we realize the danger and recognize the signs of what's happening? When people are talking about climate change and they will make a comment about being fake or a hoax or a scam, you have to ask yourselves, to what end? What are they scamming? I've went over so much information, and people could listen to all of it and simply say, well, I don't agree with the facts. I don't agree with the information that you've presented me. These people can't be reached, and it's getting too close to what we could perceive as an end to modern society, as if this bubble that we live in, that we live and breathe in, that our kids are born, is becoming, without question, harder to live, especially for you, for children under the age of 5. When you're rapidly accelerating and growing, pollution will mess you up that much more. And what are we going to do? There's no solution, because it's people. It's massive amounts of people that need to make a change collectively and agree on it. And character is what you do when you think no one is looking. So just that we say, okay, people have to do better, and then we're still finding people dumping tons of PFAS into rivers and lakes. Cats in and out, in and out, in and out all day today. Well, just a stream, I mean. Again, I thank you for viewing. I thank you for, if you haven't already, like the stream, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out immensely. Keeps me motivated in putting out climate-related videos like this. And wildfires related to wildfires. The world is heating up. We're hitting record highs all over the place. Now, the next stream that I want to do is going to be based on Antarctic ice, since it's been a little bit since I've looked into it. But using satellite imagery, we'll be able to look at new icebergs that are forming, cracks and fissures, and all kinds of ice failures. I thank you once again. If you haven't already, please consider going over to my Patreon. The link is in my description. There is a free membership level, which I'll use just for keeping tabs on how much of a community there is out here for this kind of stuff, especially climate change related. I expect resistance, opposition, but for real, there is only one planet, and everything that I read that goes with the next, it becomes apparent that we're running out of time. But what were we supposed to do? The people that hold the cards, the people that are in power, for so many of these, especially industries that are massively polluting, we can't ask our governments to go ask those people to stop. That won't happen. So what's the next step? Make less? These are strange, like, okay, so now we're going to say, okay, which company can make what? These are dangerous thoughts to have whenever it comes to, okay, well, this company can no longer exist because they've polluted for X amount of years into this lake and river. When are we going to start seeing something like that? Instead, we have litter laws in play. It's always going to be pushed on the person, the onus of climate change. But for that to be true, that means people have to quit their jobs that they know are polluting the environment. You're not going to get rid of jobs, regardless of how much people say that there are billions of worthless jobs out there that people are just adding to the climate budget, the carbon budget in the atmosphere. Every time they drive, every time they do anything, it's always going to get worse and make things worse. But what end? To what end? What if we have mild winters across all the mountaintops and we don't have any snow, no water? Since we get most of our fresh water sources from these areas, there's less snow, there's less water. Climate change messes up more than just the temperature. It causes water to evaporate, and slaps it around, and makes it run away from the heat. I thank you for joining me. Please, if you haven't already, like the stream, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out immensely. Keeps me motivated into releasing. I'm trying 2 to 3 streams a day related to climate change, because there is just so much information that if I feel I slow down, then I get behind. So I don't really have a time where I go live. I'll usually schedule a live stream for like 30 minutes ahead of time. But besides that, I really don't have any set schedule. I stream constantly regarding climate change and the human experience. What are we expecting to happen? I'm not letting the cats in. They can stay and do that. Take a look. A lot of fires. It's only going to get worse. And what are we to do? We did everything that we were told to do. That's we recycled. We were lied to. Lied to a lot. Lied to about a lot. And the small people that understood the danger. Climate denialism is multifaceted. Perhaps more than anything else right now, because it's sweltering outside. So much of the world experiencing record-breaking temperatures, including the oceans. What are we to do? Just wait? Wait and see if things change and get better? Change for the better? I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be optimistic. I'm trying to find stories that are more upbeat, but it is difficult in this category of climate change, because especially right now, it is more pressing than ever that we understand what's in front of us, what's ahead of us. Especially those of us that have children should be paying special attention. These are the lives your children are going to have. And if it sucks right now, it's going to be worse for them. Simple put, climate change is making the next generation pay for it. But there is a limit on how much that can be paid before it just becomes too much for anyone to exist. Start seeing climate change causing all interruptions of life. Essentially, if you don't have an air conditioner, you're going to have a bad time. Unfortunately, it's been a very rainy day, but it's still pretty hot, pretty muggy. For people that have to work in this, people that have to be outside, try telling them, okay, climate change is not real. They would have to be in denial to not agree that climate change is real. Because that's what it really is about, denialism. We don't have any way of reaching people on the other side of the fence. Because what are we going to do? Tell them that the worst is coming, the worst is happening, while they're making money hand over fist? Because profits, your bottom line, is the only way that I can see this happening, is when climate change starts affecting people's bottom line. That will be the only solution to driving climate change. Positive climate change. We go from 90,000 flights per day in the United States to 40,000 flights per day in the United States to cut down on carbon in the atmosphere. That won't happen. They'll tell you to walk to the store instead of driving that way. The kind of solutions we need are just stop doing stuff. I mean, we're getting to the point that 1.5C, we're going to be looking at that like, wow, we had it good. We understood what was at stake here, and people still wanted to screw it all up because they think it's funny, they think it's a joke. Either it's because of their religion or their own personal absurdities. Obtuse. Thank you again for watching. Thank you again for being here. Even if you are watching this on replay and recorded, I still appreciate it. The world is changing in ways our forefathers could have never predicted. Our grandparents could have only predicted as they saw the edge of it coming. Electronics, all kinds of goodies, luxuries. But it all involves power. And how do we continue to power our luxuries? How do we continue to make our vehicles move and our homes remain cool? It's complicated. What are we going to do? Tear down all these schools that were designed without air conditioning unit and build new schools that have air conditioner in it? These things take time, but these changes are happening so dramatically and so quickly that we might be out of time for these kinds of solutions, to reestablish building codes. Because these areas that they're finding themselves in, instead of being in 70 to 90 degree weather, they're finding themselves in 85 to 100 degree weather. It's a big change to areas that aren't used to triple digits, especially, that are more humid than most. We are on a clock, but we don't know where it points, because so much information that we would need can't be extrapolated. We can't get military operations, how many times they fire and drop bombs, how much carbon dioxide that put into the atmosphere. There are things in this world that we have absolutely no control over. There's people that we have no influence over. We can't convince entire governments climate change is real. We can't convince entire governing bodies that climate change is real. Even on a local level, it just seems to be impossible. But it's just the hotter it gets, the more people deny. I've been in talks with people that deny that really blow me away. It isn't just that, okay, I don't believe climate change is real. Like, oh, they're just making it sound worse, or they're talking about it like it's the end of the world, or it's just negative news, and negative news drives like journalism or whatever. Whatever cliche you want to use here, it doesn't matter. Climate change is real, and it's exacerbating currently existing weather and causing climates to shift. We're looking at a future that we don't understand yet. A future that makes it more difficult for human beings to just exist. We're seeing temperatures soar all over the place. And with summer approaching the United States, we're going to see temperatures that stay steady, and only drop 10 to 20 degrees at night. That's probably the worst part about it, is that it'll be 100 degrees during the day and 85 degrees at night. This is happening too quick, a lot faster than intended, partly because so much of the carbon budget we just don't know. There's so many unknowns, like ocean trawling, giant net, the two giant weights that go across the bottom of the ocean, pick up enough carbon dioxide to offset anything. But it takes 9 to 10 years, so every operation where it trawls, 8 to 9 to 10 years later, that carbon dioxide's in the atmosphere. What are we to do? How do we get people to stop trawling the oceans? Is there an incentive that we can give them to make them stop trawling the oceans? Because out of desperation to find more, they're ruining all. Alright, I thank you for watching. I do not have plans for another stream tonight. This is my third stream for the night. It can be rough, but it's something that I do for myself as well. Rather therapeutic. Alright, been here long enough. I thank you once again. Please take care.